Welcome to Publishing Out Loud. In this podcast, we cover all things publishing with some of the most inspiring digital leaders from around the world. For the first episode, you will hear a hallway style conversation between the digital media industry veteran Sanjay Trehan and ad push up head of sales Dikshant Joshi. With more than 30 years of experience, Sanjay has held senior leadership positions at HT Media, Microsoft, NDTV Convergence, and Times Internet. During his time at these companies, Sanjay led many digital and new media initiatives across web, video, and mobile categories. In this conversation, they go over new media trends, transformational technical advancements, and how a publisher should prepare for the next decade in publishing.
So, welcome, Sanjay. I know you've been in the Himalayas during these uncertain times, right? So, just wanted to understand how's it been for you during the pandemic, both from a personal and a professional standpoint.
Good evening, Dikshant. It is wonderful to be here with you on this podcast. Yes, I've been, in the last 9 months in the lower Himalayas, and I must say that it has been a fascinating time. Not
Mhm.
only have I been closer to the nature, I have also discovered the quality of the digital infrastructure in this part of the world, and I am able to work out of home uh, from here thanks to some excellent 4G connectivity in this part of the world. Uh, so one has been able to have some me time
Mhm.
and some much needed isolation and also able to work. So it's been good.
And if you were to say that, what's that one professional thing that has really worked out for you in the pandemic, what would that be?
I think, one of the key things that I really learned during the pandemic was that in every crisis, there's an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the way, pandemic has helped in the acceleration of digital transformation in this country. And, and because of the speed at which it happened, it has thrown up new opportunities. Uh, you know, Not only in our new media space, in the digital media industry, but in the whole information technology industry. So this has been, while it has been a challenging time, it has also thrown up new opportunities. And that is very gratifying to see as an industry professional.
All right. So, basis that, Sanjay, I'm like intrigued with the fact that I was going through your profile as well on LinkedIn, wherein I saw that you did masters in arts from St. Stephen's, right? From there to managing some of India's largest media brands and even tech, being a part of tech giants like Microsoft. So, how has your journey been overall? How did this transition happen? And mm, wanting to hear out your story and your journey.
Dikshant, it's been a fascinating journey.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, post my, uh, you know, graduation from St. Stephen's in history and then masters, um, I was a part of the advertising industry. I began as an advertising copywriter and then rose to become a creative director.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's that was the early part of what I would call as life. Uh, 1.0 for me. Then almost 14 years being in the industry, I sort of developed a 14-year itch, so to speak, and pivoted to digital. I became the uh, part of the founding team and the chief operating officer of Jaldi.com. Then Hindustan Times followed, then followed the Times Internet, the NDTV and MSN. And over the stages of my journey, I sort of experienced a huge adrenaline rush and felt gratified to have played a part in shaping uh, the digital media landscape in the country. So it's been it's been a very enriching journey, and I think I just got lucky.
No, I'm going to use that term for sure. That forever student in the internet space, right? Because you're right, this never ends. So, what have been the key milestones and highlights of your career? Just building on what you mentioned about the award that you got at Microsoft, but overall, what have been those key milestones and highlights of your career?
Oh, yeah, I think the key milestones would be that I've actually played a part in the early stages of some of the main, digital brands in this country, whether it is hindustantimes.com, or being a part of the early leadership team at India Times, or being a CEO of NDTV Convergence, or the head of MSN India. You know, and not only that, I was also part of the team which co-founded Internet and Mobile Association of India. So, the, not to name one specific milestone, but to be a part of an early adventure. When the world and India was discovering internet, and to go along with all that, and today to come to a stage where digital has become mainstream, I think that has been very, very gratifying personally.
Got it. Got it. Got it. That's amazing. So moving on, right? Let's talk about the media brands, right? So you've been in the industry for quite some time, right?
Mm.
So what's the biggest change that you've seen in the media industry undergo in the last decade from a global perspective? I know digitization has been a big
Mhm.
project all across the globe, but
Yeah.
overall, what would you say have been the biggest changes across the media industry in the past decade or so?
I think the biggest change is the from a passive acceptance of internet to now, a complete and overall embrace of internet, and this has happened only recently. And I think initially the media houses were sort of experimenting with digital, and now it is wonderful to see that they're all embracing it, and digital is increasingly becoming mainstream. That, I think, has been the single big change, specifically in an aspiration driven economy like ours, where print is still a sacrosanct word. And the mainstreaming of digital is one of the biggest changes that one. Besides mainstreaming, the all pervasiveness also. So it's now gone from the elite corners to now to the small towns, tier two, tier three towns, even to the rural India, to what we call as Bharat, and the acceptance and pervasiveness both uh, has been a bit of a game changer, and that has been the single biggest change.
So, Sanjay, which brings me to my next question, right? The pandemic itself, right? I see it as a catalyst, especially with respect to bringing about this change. So, how do you see that the pandemic has made that shift? I know we've shifted gears, but we
Mhm.
are still far away from a lot of levels, right?
Mhm.
So, from a digitization perspective, right, how can publishers continue to build these captive audiences given that those audiences are moving away from print as well now, right?
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
pandemic, according to me, has been a positive catalyst to it, but would love
Mhm.
to hear your thoughts on it.
In simple words, what pandemic has done has actually done what I call as the forcing function. It's forced the companies to put into fast gear their digital plans, and what they would have done in 3 years, they had to do it in 3 months. It actually gave companies no choice. It was to embrace it and to embrace the digital wholeheartedly, because otherwise, um, because digital is the way the companies bridge the gap between office and the employees. And it's the digital bridge that enabled the companies to, after the initial hiccups, that was experienced in the quarter 1 post pandemic, to now leveraging the advantages which the digital bridge could provide. So I think the forcing function has been a single big, advantage which the pandemic offered. I wish it was in a different circumstances, because obviously, it's not something that we would wish. But It also shows the agility of the companies to respond to the challenges that were imposed on them, and the digital bridge acted as a very strong ally and enable them to convert an apparent disadvantage into um, uh, a possible advantage.
Got it. Got it. So let's talk about digital or new media, as you call it, right?
Mhm.
Publishers rely heavily on Google and Facebook for distribution. How do you see that uh, evolving over the next few years?
See, we are living in an age of distributed content and connected communities. So, distribution is going to become more pervasive. Distribution is going to be the key driver of content consumption, and the ubiquity of content uh, uh, will be all about how many more gateways can you open to get to the consumer. So so uh, clearly, you know distributed content is going to be a key driver of the way the content is going to be distributed by media companies. And But it would not end there. uh, Distribution is one part of the story. Even the complete content creation paradigm is being changed, from content being created from top down to curation, and now co-opting consumers to be a part of the content creation process is going to be the way forward. It's already begun in a big way. This trend is going to be further accelerated. So distribution is going to be ultimately all about ubiquity now.
If I were to say, would you say that this is more about how, as publishers, uh, one is able to engage with the user-generated content communities? Would that be something that would be correct? User-generated content
Uh,
communities,
so
because
user generated.
democratization is something which the internet allows,
Mhm,
right? So,
mhm.
what's your take on that?
So, user generated content communities is one part of the story, yes, but we are also living in an age of fake news. So, we need to tread on this path very carefully, because you need to have the ability to sift the kernel from the chaff.
Mhm.
Now, and that's so what I'm saying is that community creation will be important for publishers, and if they're able to create communities out of their own engaged users, continue to engage with them, reward them, gratify them, talk to them, harness their emotional narrative, and use them to their advantage by custom creating content that works for the users. That would open up new gamuts. So user generated community is a double edged sword, but if you have a community of interest which is loyal to the publisher, which is an engaged community which a publisher talks to, I think that is the way to go forward.
So, I think if you look at the biggest companies like even Facebook, right? Technically, the users generate the content, but they have these strong moderation processes
Mhm.
and technologies to do that.
Mhm.
How do you see a similar parallel being drawn into media organizations, right? Because if I were to say, there's a lot of content which gets posted on Facebook, right? But they have a very strong moderation and filtration process,
Mhm.
which allows them to be democratic in terms of people posting things. But I
Mhm.
understand that this is news and we need
Mhm.
to be very accurate about it. But how do you see that evolving from a media house perspective?
See, absolutely. I mean, this is a great question because clearly, we are living in an age where there is a proliferation of fake news. Hence, credibility of content is very, very important. So clearly, the mainstream media houses have a responsibility to fight the menace of fake news.
Hmm.
Brands need to tell their own story. brands need to own uh, the consumers, and I think that is something which is very very important. Now, as far as moderation is concerned, it's important that while self-regulation is key, but we need to also look at a regulatory framework where the fear of the law needs to be there for people who are blatantly violating some of these norms of authenticity and credibility. So, uh, while I'm a votary for self-regulation, I do feel that proactively, one also needs to look at some kind of a framework where we all need to operate in.
So, Sanjay, according to you, what's the next big thing in the field of audience engagement?
Yeah, that is one of my favorite subjects, and I think the next big thing, which is already happening, but it is not truly leveraged uh, to from our point of view, is uh, you know community creation. Because not only do we need to create communities, we need to be constantly in conversation with that community. So the whole approach has to be about a bottoms up approach. We go to the community, we talk to them, we listen to them, we don't talk down to them. We we co-opt the community into content creation, and we harness their power to create content, uh, and so it's going to be a two-way conversation with the community. To some extent, it's already happening in social media, whether it's on Instagram or on Facebook, but it needs to be much more bigger, more pervasive, and need to be more organically seeded. So I know it's an oxymoron when I say organically seeded, but what I mean is that the communities need not be created out of an urgency to give tactical push, but to actually have a genuine engagement with people at large. And to some extent, organically, the community has to grow. Only then it will be a loyal community for the brand. So, the next big thing in audience engagement, from my point of view, is going to be how publishers or brands are not only able to create an engaged community, but also leverage them to their mutual advantage.
Would you say that this is with the perspective of driving loyalty for brands, particularly? Because what are like some of the key things
Yes.
apart from loyalty that you would see it would have direct benefits of?
Absolutely. I think this is an engaged community is a loyal community. And a loyal community is the one that keeps on coming back to you, and hence uh, returned user is far cost effective than a new users. Not only that, an interactive and empowered community is your biggest ally. They are your brand ambassadors, you know, and they are also the best way to fight the menace of fake news. So while you may have an odd guy, trolling and spreading rumors in social media, but you have a loyal and engaged community, the community will take down, uh, that menace spreader. So loyalty, engagement, return on enhancement, and not only that, in the longer term, the community will even help shape up your brand or product trajectory, because an engaged and informed community is your best ears to the ground, and that could be a very very compelling way to shape your brand story.
Got it. So at the end of the day, Sanjay, while the publishers and the media companies across the globe are in it for journalism and the content itself, but at the same time, there's money to be made as well, right? And there are two schools of thoughts in it these days with respect to monetization. One is subscription versus advertising.
Mm.
How do you see these communities reflecting onto the two? And advertising probably has been one of the most popular things, but how would a publisher leverage these communities both from an advertising perspective as well as from a subscription perspective?
That's a great question. So let me first begin with subscription, and then I'll come to advertising. Okay, personally, I'm bullish on subscription now because whatever we have seen now, the early indications are that, and I'm specifically talking about India because in the West, specifically in US and UK, subscriptions are really scaling as we speak. Early indications in India are very positive because consumers have begun to realize that there are really no free lunches and quality needs to be paid for. And what are these early indicators? The early indicators are very simple. Who would have thought that India would be willing to pay a pretty reasonable amount of money for OTTs? Netflix today has a subscription at 649 rupees a month. A mid-level subscription at two, and almost every other OTT is paid, and there are rising, and Indians are paying. It tells us that if you produce differentiated content, if the consumer perceives quality, if it's exclusive and multimedia enabled, the consumer is showing the proclivity to pay. Because how long can uh, the advertising, which is today in mainstream media, is diminishing, and in digital, it's while it's becoming pervasive, it is being increasingly intrusive. How long will it continue to pay the bills? So, to cut a long story short, I'm bullish on subscription, but having said that, it is not subscription versus advertising. Subscription will continue to be the top of the monetization pyramid. The mid and the bottom will both be led by advertising. Let me explain the mid part. In the mid part, I see um, branded content being the key driver. Solutions-led approach to advertising where you don't just sell space or a slot or a position, but you actually sell a solution to the client. I expect the mid to be led by branded content. At the bottom of this will be programmatic, which is where if you have an engaged community, programmatic will actually help you narrowcast the message to that engaged community. So uh, it's very early days, Dikshant, as far as the monetization pyramid is concerned. But I'm clearly looking at a world beyond advertising, and the world beyond advertising would be essentially led by branded content, video monetization, and leveraging of engaged community, and most importantly, uh, content syndication. Because the key asset that the media companies are producing is content. And syndication of content to both Indian markets and to the global markets is um, uh, it already is and will emerge as a serious monetization player.
Got it. Got it. So, Sanjay, I think that brings me to an interesting point here, right? India almost has around 700 million internet users, right, in
Mhm.
2020. And out of
Mhm.
that, I was reading a report about the Netflix users. So, there are
Mhm.
only 4.6 million paid subscribers in India who use Netflix, right?
Yes. Mhm.
The media companies have been focusing on volumes,
Mhm.
right? There's a massive gap between the people who can actually afford these subscriptions versus there's
Mhm.
a like a massive audience which cannot,
Mhm.
right? So how do
Mhm.
you really see subscriptions being positioned from a news and media perspective especially, right?
So, this will be, I would actually call it, instead of, in the classical management, you use the 80-20 principle. I'm looking at a 90-10 principle. So 90% of it will be governed and led by advertising. The 10% of the premium eyeballs, people who are looking for more immersive experience, more in-depth content, more insight-based content, and are willing to pay will go for that. Essentially, people in the news domain who are looking for financial news, people who are looking for personal finance, investment news based on the the financial indicators, research reports, and stuff like that. They will be the early adopters of the pay model, but by and large, uh, the the 90% of consumers will continue to consume news which is financed by the advertising model. So I'm not saying subscription will replace advertising. No way. In fact, both are going to grow. Both are going to grow in terms of the the percentage. The advertising will continue to grow within its 90%. This is my sort of peek into the future, and subscription over time will acquire a healthy 10% thing. But both will continue to grow because it is not at the expense of one another. It is they both would cater to different um, sort of sections of the consuming public.
Got it. Got it. No, I think that makes sense.
But within the advertising domain, I see definitely a trend which is going to be more towards being a cell based solution than a volume based solution. So increasingly, volume may become meaningless, and a solution based approach, which looks at the 360-degree based solution, deploying various, uh, you know, uh, uh, 360-degree products available to you, a complete cyclical approach where you envelop the consumer. That will be the predominant, for which there will be a premium that will be charged. So the direct sell will increasingly become solution sell. Having said that, is the programmatic going to go away? No way. Programmatic will actually grow. And that is why I see both these things happening, and I don't see a contradiction between the two, because it is at what level of the monetization pyramid you are in. The bottom and below bottom pyramid will be led by programmatic because it's the most efficient way. It's the most um, uh, uh, smart way to generate the bang for your buck, and both from the publisher's inventory monetization perspective as well as for advertisers reach perspective. Uh, and yet, for a specific image based communication, which is also a communication which is not only about response but also about brand building, will be and for long term relationship with the consumer, that will be morphed into a solution cell basis. So I see actually both happening, and there is space for both to grow within their uh, areas.
So, Sanjay, given the industry is revolving at a rapid pace, right? So, what would be that one piece of advice that you will have for somebody who's just starting in the industry, and two, for somebody who's been there in the industry for quite some time?
Okay, for let me begin with what I would say to somebody who's just starting out. I would say that, look, remember that you are in a knowledge industry, so please be a knowledge worker. Absorb as much as you can. Absorb like a sponge. Have self belief and faith in your idea, and be dogged in your pursuit of that idea. So persevere, persevere, do not lose heart. And most importantly, don't be afraid to fail. Failure is a part of uh, the growth process in the internet industry. You will fall and you will get up. Each failure contains the seeds of success. So keep an eye on your, aim. Keep an eye on where you want to go. Aim for the sky, but ensure that you keep your feet firmly planted on the ground. And and by that I mean, ensure that your eyes remain focused on cost, because many uh, an internet startup have failed because they lost focus on cost, and they wanted to grow exponentially. So as I said earlier, be a forever student, forever learner, and remain humble, and the success will be yours. So this is something that I've not only seen but also experienced. That would help. You know. And the second part of your question was on what would I say to somebody who's been there for some time in this industry. I would say that, remember one thing, that internet is all about doing and learning, and ensure that you are constantly looking at products which are evolutionary in nature, because in internet you can never say that, oh, I've been there, I've done that, so that's it. No, it is, iteration is the key, and change is constant in shaping products and consumer experience in our industry. And so it's important that you continue to innovate, continue to sometimes take a step back, reinvent, and relaunch and renew. And speed of execution is critical, so ensure that you do it fast, and you do it well. And remember the cardinal rule, and this is something which sometimes we lost sight of: those who own the platform owns the customer. So this is something very, very invest in uh, in building sustainable business models. Uh, these are simple home truths that one has learned over time, and that's what I would say to somebody who's been there in the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great. So, Sanjay, you've been a CEO yourself, right? So, just to understand, who should the CEO listen to the most? We have content, we have operations, we have ad sales, and then obviously technology and engineering. But who should the CEO listen to the most?
No, sometimes it's good for the CEO to be a fly on the wall. I honestly tell you, because it's not that. And if one thing internet is demolished, it is the hierarchy. Internet is all about being a great leveler. So the CEO needs to listen to everybody where he or she feels who he or she feels is adding value. uh, you know so it's good to keep your ears open. It's good to listen to people who are thinking out of the box, people who sometimes challenge you. So it's good to people listen to people who challenge you and who question your assumptions. And so I would say, a smart CEO um, needs to be uh, humble, very level headed, and should be able to all influences coming his or her way.
Got that. So, Sanjay, I think first of all, thanks a lot for your time today. But it was like lovely talking to you. And any closing thoughts that you may have?
I mean, I think we are living in interesting times. All I say is, these are very, very interesting times. And while we are looking at the unleashing of the digital media, I would say that we have only just begun, because imagine, this is such a young industry. Imagine where this industry would take us in a decade or 2 decades from now. So we are on the cusp of revolutionary changes in business models, in specifically in the new media industry that we are in. So all I would say is that, keep watching this space and keep learning, keep absorbing. This is going to be an exciting ride.
Awesome. Awesome. Again, it was a privilege speaking with you, Sanjay. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you very much, Dikshant. Truly appreciate your incisive questions.
Thanks for tuning into the conversation. If you like the content, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player, including Apple, Google, and Spotify. For more information and deep dives into anything related to the publishing, check out the Ad Pusher blog linked in show notes.